Hello from the Channel studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the programme that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Tenyola Oyetayo. On the programme this week, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky secures fresh military aid at the G7 summit, plus fighting reported in Sudan despite 7-day ceasefire agreed by warring parties. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has secured fresh military aid from the United States during a day of frantic diplomatic activity at the G7 summit. Leaders of the world's richest democracies said they would not back down from supporting Ukraine in a warning to Russian President Vladimir Putin as he claimed to have taken the eastern city of Bakhmut, something Kyiv denied.
He's going to wave at us. There he is.
The Group of Seven summit in the Japanese city of Hiroshima was electrified by the arrival of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Upon his arrival on Saturday, the Ukrainian president got a warm welcome in meetings with various world leaders. During the final day of the three-day summit, US President Joe Biden announced a $375 million package of military aid, including artillery and armored vehicles for Ukraine.
Today I'm announcing the next tranche of U.S. security assistance to Ukraine, a package that includes more ammunition, artillery, armored vehicles to bolster Ukraine's battlefield abilities. And the United States continues to help Ukraine respond, recover, and rebuild. And we're also supporting your pursuit of a just peace, just one aspect of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity that has to be non-negotiable. It just has to happen. So, Mr. President, what the people of Ukraine are defending, what you've achieved is a matter for the entire world to observe, and they're in awe of what you've done so far, really and truly. It's incredible. Together with the entire G7, we have Ukraine's back, and I promise we're not going anywhere. So, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, thank you for your help, leadership, for your support, and really for this new package. That's great. Thank you very much from our people, and I'm so happy that we have so strong relations.
Other leaders of the G7, Japan, Germany, Britain, France, Italy and Canada echoed the US president's sentiments.
This week, with our G7 allies, we reaffirmed our support for Ukraine. As you know, on Thursday, Canada imposed new sanctions on individuals and entities that provide military technology to Russia's armed forces or that are involved in ongoing human rights violations, including the transfer of Ukrainian children to Russia.
Meanwhile, the US president told G7 leaders Washington supports joint allied training programs for Ukrainian pilots on F-16's warplanes, although Kyiv has not won commitments for delivery of the fighter jets.
You know, in my private meeting with President Zelensky after the G7 meeting and with his staff, I told him the United States, together with our allies and partners, is going to begin training Ukrainian pilots in fourth-generation fighter aircraft, including F-16s, to strengthen Ukraine's Air Force as part of a long-term commitment to Ukraine's ability to defend itself. We provided to last year all that they needed to deal with what they were dealing with at the moment. And that's when now we're moving in the direction of putting them in a position to be able to defend themselves in ways beyond what they've had to deal with so far.
In inviting him to Japan,
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak added that training would start this summer and Ukraine would get the air force it needed for the future.
I want to pay tribute to my friend Volodymyr. It was a privilege to welcome him to Chequers earlier this week. And I believe his attendance at this G7 was a moment of historic significance. The image of the G7 and our partners standing shoulder to shoulder with President Zelensky sends a powerful message about the unity and determination of the G7 allies. We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes because their security is our security. The G7 strategy is clear. Our military, diplomatic and economic tools are all part of the Ukrainian counter-offensive. We're delivering more support on the battlefield through air defence, artillery, tanks and long-range missiles, which the UK was the first country to provide. We're supporting Ukraine to develop the air force it needs for the future, with the UK training Ukrainian pilots starting this summer. And we've made a real breakthrough at this summit, thanks to President Biden's support for an international coalition to provide F-16 jets.
The Hiroshima summit also gave President Zelensky a chance to lobby for support from other attendees, like Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Brazil's President Lula da Silva, who have so far declined to condemn the Russian invasion. Meanwhile, the summit was also dominated by tensions with China, notably over economic security and self-ruled Taiwan. Worried by the outsized role China now plays in supply chains, the G7 issued a communiqué that set out a common strategy towards future dealings with the world's second-largest economy. It also warned Beijing over what was described as its militarization activities in the Asia-Pacific region.
On the China language, we have said for some time that China's activity, and we've expressed concern for ourselves as well, the strafing of one of our aircraft, the other activity that we've seen has provided concern. We've expressed that concern in the past. We'll continue to do so. What we need to do is to make sure that we work in a way that enhances peace, security and stability in the region. We very clearly support the status quo when it comes to the Taiwan Straits, and that is Australia's position. We've consistently stated it.
China has accused the G7 nations of collaborating to smear and attack Beijing and has summoned the Japanese ambassador to register an official protest. China has also warned the UK to stop slandering the country to avoid further damage to bilateral relations. Away from Ukraine, a week-long ceasefire in Sudan intended to allow the delivery of humanitarian aid got off to a shaky start on Monday evening as witnesses in the capital Khartoum reported fighter jets over the city and continued fighting in some areas. World powers have put pressure on the army and the rival paramilitary rapid support forces to sign a deal to silence the guns. Previous attempts have fallen apart, with aid agencies struggling to operate amid the violence. After surviving weeks of fighting in Khartoum, Sana Mahmoud finally got her family to safety in Cairo. But she says her daughter still wakes up at night screaming.
They saw everything. There was gunfire around our home. They saw the events and the fire. She still screams at night and cries out to me, "Why are these people coming to kill us?" And I tell her, "The planes are flying above us." When she sees the plane, she comes running saying, "Mom, the plane has come. Mom, these people are coming for us at home. They are coming to beat us." I tell her that the plane is just flying and not targeting us.
The account is just a glimpse into the trauma being suffered by hundreds of thousands of children in Sudan.
Children, of course, in Sudan are bearing the heaviest brunt of the hostilities. Before the conflict, children were already caught in a perfect storm of crisis on top of crisis. And what this conflict has done is that it has further aggravated the already ongoing health and nutrition crisis, the water scarcity crisis, and it's deepened the learning crisis.
In Port Sudan on the Red Sea, where thousands of people have fled in the hope of evacuation, a group of volunteering artists organizes recreational activities for children to alleviate the pressures on their mental health. Officials here say many children suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder.
With this crisis, with this conflict, we have seen a nationwide closure of schools and educational institutions. Already we were talking about 7 million kids out of school, 12 million somehow in schools, but very disruptive learning over the last couple of years, particularly in the last year and a half, due to teacher strikes and school closures across the country. You can imagine what the impact now is with the school closures on the mental health, psychosocial well-being of children. Children are under enormous distress, as you can imagine, particularly in the hotspot locations of this conflict due to continuous bombardment and shooting. And we have seen this and experienced this firsthand.
UNICEF says that at least 368,000 children have been forced from their homes in Sudan, and a further 82,000 have fled into neighboring states. It estimates that 190 children were killed in the first 10 days of the war. In total, the United Nations says more than 1 million people have been displaced by fighting in Sudan so far, including 250,000 refugees.
Over a month since the fighting have started, we're making an urgent appeal for the safety of civilians and to allow humanitarian aid to move into Sudan as we continue to scale up our response for the over 1 million people who have now been recorded as displaced within Sudan or to neighboring countries. Within Sudan, people are braving danger, notably moving from Khartoum, Darfur, and other unsafe areas.
The army and paramilitary rapid support forces have been locked in weeks of conflict that has killed hundreds of people and turned the streets of the capital, Khartoum, into war zones. As the warring sides in the conflict were set to silence their guns Monday night for a 7-day ceasefire, the UN Security Council urged them to use the pause in fighting to pave the way for lasting peace.
We remain firmly committed to 4 immediate priorities. First, achieving a stable ceasefire with a monitoring mechanism. Second, preventing the escalation or ethnicization of the conflict. Third, protection of civilians and provision of humanitarian relief. And fourth, preparing for when the time is ripe, a fresh political process with the participation of a broad array of civil and political actors, including women.
Permit me to highlight these 6 pillars. 1, a coordinated international action to avoid a proliferation and duplication of mediation initiatives. 2, immediate, unconditional, permanent, and comprehensive ceasefire. 3, urgent humanitarian action to relieve the suffering of the Sudanese people. 4, protection of civilians, state infrastructure, and to ensure accountability for actions taken by the warring parties. 5, firm support to neighboring countries in the region that have been impacted by this crisis. And 6, resumption of fully representative, inclusive political process towards the return of democratic, civilian-led government.
The US and Saudi Arabia mediated ceasefire was agreed on Saturday after the warring sides pledged a week earlier to protect civilians amid fighting. However, on Monday, hours before the week-long ceasefire aimed at allowing delivery of aid was due to take effect, Sudan's army conducted airstrikes in the capital, Khartoum. The Northeast African nation has for years been on the brink of conflict since the military ousted the country's former 3-decade government of President Omar al-Bashir in a civilian-backed coup in 2019. When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, World Health Organization Director General urges nations to prepare for the next pandemic. More details in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us on the program. Although COVID-19 may no longer be a global public health emergency, the World Health Organization says countries must still strengthen response to the disease and prepare for future pandemics and other threats. According to the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, it's time to advance negotiations on preventing the next pandemic, which could be even more deadlier than COVID.
Weeks after the emergency phase of COVID-19 was declared over, the head of the World Health Organization is urging countries to make changes and start preparing for the next global pandemic.
We cannot kick this can down the road. If we do not make the changes that must be made, then who will? And if we do not make them now, and when? When the next pandemic comes knocking, and it will, we must be ready to answer decisively, collectively, and equitably.
Speaking at the 10-day annual World Health Assembly in Geneva, Dr. Tedros, despite COVID-19 no longer being a global health emergency, says the health threat is not over.
Over the past 3 years, COVID-19 has turned our world upside down. Almost 7 million deaths have been reported, but we know the toll is several times higher, at least 20 million. The pandemic has caused severe disruption to health systems, severe economic, social, and political upheaval. To be clear, COVID-19 is still with us. It still kills, it's still changing, and it still demands our attention. But it no longer represents a public health emergency of international concern. The end of COVID-19 as a global health emergency is not just the end of bad dream from which we have woken. We cannot simply carry on as we did before. Chief among those lessons is that we can only face shared threats with a shared response. This is the moment for us to write a new chapter in global health history.
It's encouraging to see
The World Health Organization's 194 member states are now drafting a pandemic treaty, which is up for adoption at next year's assembly. The treaty seeks to shore up the world's defense against new pathogens following COVID-19, which has killed nearly 7 million people. At the same meeting, countries approved $6.83 billion budget for 2024 to 2025, and the World Health Body launched a roadmap to focus on the links between the health and sustainable, inclusive, and innovation-led economic growth.
We have too much money going into ill health and not enough public finance for health. How do we reverse that process? How do we actually ensure that the innovations that occur are oriented towards greater health? How do we prevent the whole gamut of other things that impact on health, the socio-economic determinants of health? How do we ensure the adequate finance for that, both public and private? How do we direct them? Mariana has written a lot about market shaping and co-creating the markets. So these are all the ideas that imbue this report.
Of course we care about growth, but we need to direct that growth to be inclusive and sustainable, problem-oriented, people-centered, planet-centered, and guess what? Ironically, we actually, I should whisper, grow more when we do it that way, but grow with a direction. So really going back to issues of how we do capitalism. This is not just about, oh, throw money to the developing world. No, the developing world will benefit if we do capitalism differently, if we do corporate governance differently, if we do public-private partnerships differently, if we do finance and the structures of finance differently. So it's really a call to arms and an inspirational one. This isn't about an us versus them. This is, we truly are in this together, hopefully, really rethinking a lot of these underlying structures. And again, that's also what makes our report different from previous ones.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has identified 9 priority diseases that pose the biggest risk to public health. They were deemed to be most risky due to a lack of treatments or the ability to cause a pandemic. COVID is on the list along with Ebola, Marburg, and Lassa fever.
And finally on the program, we head over to the United Arab Emirates for the Salon de Chocolat's second annual edition in Dubai. It's the largest event dedicated to chocolate and pastry in the country. And our correspondent, Mayowa Adegoke, was there to bring us all the yummy details. Take a look.
It's Salon de Chocolat's second annual edition in Dubai, and everyone here wants the same thing: chocolate, chocolate, and more chocolate. This 30-year-old global fair, which began in Paris, is gaining ground fast in the Middle Eastern hub of Dubai.
Last year we decided to do it in Dubai, and this is our second edition this year. All our exhibitors were very happy, our chefs too, so we had to do it again and again, and we will keep on doing it.
The show brings together chocolatiers and chocolate concepts in Dubai and across the UAE for a 3-day exhibition and a one-of-a-kind fashion show, where chocolate lovers, pastry makers, and business owners in the industry come to network, learn from master chefs, and experience latest trends in the world of chocolate.
As its name, it's a very creamy, pleasant taste.
I saw all different kinds of chocolate, interesting designs, and the shows as well. So it's interesting because I will learn from different experience from last year and this year.
Across the room, chocolate of every shape, color, and flavor is available for tasting. Many unique brands also take this opportunity to showcase their concepts, including the world's first camel milk chocolate, homegrown in the UAE.
The camels only give about 6-7 liters of milk a day, so it's a very expensive milk. It's a very complicated milk to get. We have a camel farm. We're blessed in that sense. That's why we're today still, as far as I know, the only ones who make real camel milk chocolate.
Same thing as yesterday.
The fashion show is the high point of the event, as chefs work with local fashion designers to create chocolate outfits that look too good to eat.
Created by Chef Edmond Lucas, technical advisor Paolo Curato, and inspired by fashion designer Yasaman Tarasi.
We take 3 days to prepare the flowers, then 1 whole day, which is like 18 hours to fix the flower step by step with a real chocolate couverture 32% and dusted with silver powder to give that shine. Also we have spray cocoa butter, pure cocoa butter with natural color, natural cocoa white color, the dentelle here, and with natural color red roses, as you can see. These all roses here, it's made by hand, no machineries, nothing. It's handmade, created. We use pâtissier chocolates, which is based in Singapore, and we are happy to be with you here in Galeries Lafayette Salon de Chocolat.
I'm a fashion student at ESMA Dubai. I was approached by Salon de Chocolat, and the theme was women that inspire us. Because I have an art background from high school, I decided to go with Frida Kahlo, who's a big artistic inspiration of mine.
Chocolate is a $47 billion industry, and while West Africa produces about 70% of the world's cocoa, its chocolate industry is hardly visible in the global market.
And that's the program today, but remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. Bye for now.